Hey there, friends. I really am speaking of Quakers in particular today. So I say friends, capital F. We joke around the society whether someone is capital F or small f friend. Of course, you can be both or neither, I suppose. I feel like I don't do any commercials, but here's Lysol, and I just used it to clean the glass. I have a glass desk, which is poetic in some way. If you're gonna live in a glass house, dot dot dot. So what do I want to talk about? I want to talk about Quakers and beer, and I just want to ramble a little bit and give you my understanding of what happened. Prohibition comes along. Why? Because, and by prohibition I mean a constitutional amendment, the only one that's ever been backed out again. In other words, the only amendment to the Constitution that has been repealed. Maybe there's others we should repeal. I don't know, but this one was immediately a consequence of women finally getting the vote, right? Because they were sick and tired of the men coming home having gone to the bar right outside the factory gates, the many bars, right? It's an archetype. You leave work, it's kind of been a miserable week. You're treated like a machine. They see you as a machine. You go with your buddies to the bar and you drink, and on payday, you pay what you owe for the rest of the week and whatever. And what was really bad about bars that the women at home really didn't appreciate is women would frequent the bars, right? And try to tempt a guy away from the bar, off upstairs maybe. In other words, the brothel side. We're talking Wild West, Westworld stereotypes. This is all done a million times in the movies, right? So I'm not telling you anything new. It's just no wonder that once women got the vote, the first thing they made sure happened was to outlaw alcohol. But this was rife with unintended side effects because you don't just tell people addicted to something to stop. They keep doing it. It's just now it's illegal. So all of a sudden, organized crime is more important than ever. And I would say there's no understanding the United States or its history without really strong emphasis on organized crime. Like, by organized, I don't mean like there's one boss at the top or something. Organized just means there's a lot of institutionalized and routine sort of ways of doing things, like getting your beer if it's illegal. Now it's legal here, and I'm putting the Quaker QR code for the Friends meeting right on the glass to show that my branch of Quakers is okay with beer, even brews beer in some places. However, what happened after Prohibition was repealed? People still didn't want to go back to the bad old days with all those taverns. And like the women had won some compromises from the men, I would say, in that factory beer was invented and refrigerated trucks, and you could take the beer in six packs to this clean new institution called a supermarket. And they had them in malls. Malls were still coming, but we had the supermarket and we had the beer, refrigerated beer, and the guy could take it home with him on the way home from work. And the more liberated wife now and the husband could share their six pack together, their factory six pack. So taverns were still kind of out of business, relatively speaking, after Prohibition was repealed, and factory beer almost knocked out microbeer. This idea of small stills or little breweries, and some would have really great products, right? That almost died out with the invention of factory beer, because then you can monopolize the routes. You just won't let the trucks carry the competition and so on. So you get distribution wars, and there's a whole long history there. Which again, I think YouTube must have it. I haven't curated all this stuff. I've done some research, but if I were going through high school, college today, and I wanted to be up to date on what's been going on, it wouldn't make any sense to skip Prohibition. And they're going to watch Breaking Bad, they might get some insight into cocaine, But what about the whole alcohol side of life, right? What about the anthropology of it? Like when I went to Princeton, we read a study that claimed to show, and I'm throwing this out as just, is it true? That in Japanese society, alcohol had a totally different expected effect. And they didn't say if it was genetic or cultural. I think epigenetic would be the word to say. That when you drink in good company there after work with the boss, have the sake around the table, everyone gets more sociable. But I think a lot of Americans would say that too. This stereotype that the drinker gets loud and violent and kind of has a meltdown, that happens. That happens a lot. The guys would go home, they would hit their wives, they would hit their kids. Many, many people today can attest to the violent nature of drunk people. So no, I'm not mitigating that, but I think there's also the kind of more just having fun around the dinner table drunk and palling around with your friends and not getting violent. The Japanese stereotype, in other words, I think is not confined to Japan. But anyway, in anthropology, we would study this, the psychological anthropology by Professor Fernandez, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, I shared that class with Amy Marcos, the daughter of Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos. I grew up under the martial law period, in the martial law period myself, in Manila. And San Miguel, I really do like, and I used to be able to get it here at Belmont Station, but their distributor has stopped showing up. And so, hey, San Miguel, if you're listening, you're still welcome, as far as I'm concerned, to have a tap here somewhere if you're still into the export market. Nothing personal about politics or anything, just I'm always homesick a little bit for Manila. So what I just wanted to say then is a lot of Quakers are teetotalers or totally anti-alcohol. You will find people who are saying, hey, I'm a Quaker, and part of my religion is alcohol is no go. And I totally acknowledge that. In other words, there's a large spectrum. You know about Git. You know about branching. You know about versions. You know about merging. Because merging also happens, right? So I'm just saying the branch of Quakerism that I'm on here at the moment, it's much more McMiniman's, which is a local beer place. It's got that Grateful Dead vibe going. And I'm trying to get it across here more with it's ritualized in some degree. There's an aesthetic that goes with everything. And actually the aesthetic is part of what keeps it in the right place in your life. It's not all just, like decorations are not meaningless. Where the beer is served, how it's served, what the conversation is, all of these variables play a role. The bar itself, as we saw in my little history there, is its own thing. A sports bar is different from a coffee shop that also serves beer, which Portland has a lot of those. But people are there with their laptops. They're usually being fairly studious, right? And I think that's kind of the opposite of some bars. You go there because you're sick and tired of studying and you just want to like maybe act out, right? It's a question. Depends on your local bar. I don't want to over stereotype and I don't want to come down with some strong personal judgment against something that you have chosen. Like I'm not here to pick fights. I'm just here to communicate some history as I understand it. And I'll end with this Trim Tab Brewing in Alabama. Gravitational Nectar. This is a great beer. It tastes good and they've got the right iconography for this friend. All right, talk to you later.